Welcome to another ISG Smartalk. We're glad to have you with us. Today we are discussing simple solutions to your scaling challenges. Before I hand things over to our fantastic presenters, I just will quickly go over a couple housekeeping notes with you. We are recording this webinar, and you can access the replay at the same link you used to register. Feel free to forward that link to any colleagues who may be missing today's session as well. You can submit a question at any time during the presentation by using the Ask a Question box, which is on the left side of your screen. That about covers it on my end. So with that, I will now hand things over to Wayne Butterfield to kick off today's presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Gillian, for the excellent intro as always, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. If you're in the UK, early evening, I guess if you're in Europe, and good morning to our friends over in the US and beyond. So I'm really pleased for you to join us today. We've got a great presentation and discussion, obviously some proprietary research also, which Erik, our my esteemed partner and friend joining us, will discuss. And of course, this is as interactive as needs be. So I would love any questions, queries, fire them into the presenter chat, and we'll do our best to kind of answer as and when we go through the show today. So without further ado, you've seen me. I'm Wayne Butterfield. I'm the Director of Automation at ISG Automation. And I'm joined today, it's my pleasure to welcome Erik over at RPA Supervisor. So Erik, hello.
Hello, Wayne, and everyone else. Thank you very much for having me on, and I'm looking forward to your presentation and to help out with answering any questions on that. I'm the founder of RPA Supervisor. RPA Supervisor was built on or should I say, frustrations of scaling up in the more than 30 odd implementations of RPA that I've been party to over the last 10 years. And also in close cooperation with Blue Prism, although we're now supporting multiple tools. So that's a background. It's there to help you scale your RPA automations and drive your hyper-automation journey.
Fantastic. And for everyone's viewing pleasure today, just to give you a bit of an overview of what we aim to cover. So obviously we've gone through the intro, which is great. I will talk about intelligent automation, and we'll start to talk about some of the reasons for scale or not. We'll then get into the survey results, which I'm sure everyone's really interested to see what the latest research is that's being completed on RPA and some of those scaling challenges. We'll deep dive a little bit, and I'll kind of quiz Erik on the role of RPA Supervisor in helping organizations scale, and then we'll obviously open it up to any further Q&A. Aim really would be to spend the next kind of 40 minutes chatting, answering any of your questions, of course, and then hopefully leaving a bit of time at the end either to wrap up or to answer any further questions. So we'll definitely try and finish within the hour, everybody. So do bear with us. What I will do is I'll bring Erik in at various different points throughout the presentation, so you don't have to listen to me all of the time. And this certainly shouldn't be death by PowerPoint. There's not that many slides, which obviously is generally good news. But there are obviously some, they do make a great backdrop, to be fair. And I think the first one for me really is about kind of setting the scene. So I know, on the phone we've got, people of all levels of maturity. We've got service providers, we've got, fellow consultants and implementers. We've got customers, end users, etc. So we've really got a good spectrum of people on the phone who have been involved in automation in various forms over the years. This is the latest kind of view of intelligent automation, hyper-automation, whatever you want to call it, from ISG. We very much see that automation is far beyond RPA, although today's discussion will focus more around the role of RPA. but it's certainly a tool in a toolkit versus the panacea for enterprise transformation. We absolutely see three elements to the role of intelligent automation. The growing interest that we see in process discovery and some of those technology types there, really, really important, and seeing a lot of interest in those areas. The next webinar we complete actually will be specifically about that process discovery area, so keep an eye out in your inboxes for when that one comes live. Obviously, the stack of intelligent automation tools, we like to break these down into the characteristics of the technology rather than the complex nature of the technology itself. Look at technology as replicating a thing that you do rather than look at it to automate a process. So copy and paste information, looking at an invoice, reading an email, making a complex decision, or communicating. And of course, the growing value now that we're starting to see through the use of technology to actually prove business value has been created. And it goes far beyond hours back to the business, which has been a well-trodden metric historically in the enterprise, certainly to do with RPA and the value that RPA creates. Of course, there are a lot. The ecosystem itself is a lot bigger, and Erik, from your perspective, RPA Supervisor as a technology sits within this ecosystem, but obviously doesn't. Is not actually on the slide itself. Where do you see the kind of future of, if we think about, monitoring the robots? I mean, do you see a future where you're monitoring more than one technology and you're owning kind of end-to-end process automations?
Absolutely. We're already monitoring. RPA and Blue Prism, UiPath, and so on, integrating with Microsoft Power Automate platform, building connectors to all low-code platforms, and so on. And like a Gartner analyst said, you're actually a hyper-automation orchestrator, combining sort of human-in-the-loop humans and all systems with RPA and driving that hyper-automation journey that most organizations are looking to do.
Fantastic. I often think of your technology as a technology managing technology versus what we have historically seen is obviously we've automated tasks that people complete, but they've been then monitored by people. So you're almost automating the automator's role of monitoring. Gets confusing, but that's kind of the way I see it, at least.
Yeah, so we are automating the automations, and my friends who are not in this space find what I do very difficult to grasp.
I have to tell my 6-year-old that Daddy just builds robots. It's a much easier way of describing what I do to a 6-year-old and to other people than really what I do, which is just talk a lot. So talking about talking, let's kind of move on. I tend to kind of break down transformation into and certainly hyper automation to these three buckets: kind of discover, remove, and improve. And if you think about the earlier slide, these are the three kind of layers that we have. Now, this is technology, this is ways of working, and even lumping these together, it's not necessarily the panacea. It doesn't necessarily mean because you've got all of these building blocks in place that you are likely to scale. There are kind of other things that we've really struggled with that maybe haven't been thought about as you increase the importance in automation within your organization. And we'll see this in some of the research later. But there's some inherent gaps in organizations that have failed to scale. So we absolutely see some trends in those that have, but we've absolutely seen some gaps in those that haven't. Enablement's a really interesting one. So enabling as much of the business as possible to be able to take advantage of the technology stack that you have created is one. And we've seen and heard a lot about the concept of citizen developer. I'm working with a number of clients at the moment where they're creating lots of federated centers of excellence across their business to really try and take advantage. they're not owning it all centrally. They're owning the governance, they're owning process, etc. But really, they're trying to send the capability as much out into the operation as possible. And enablement, digital enablement, is a really key one. And obviously, from an ISG perspective, we acquired an organization called Neurilify last year, specifically to try and help organizations enable their workforce to be able to take advantage of intelligent automation. And the other one is optimize. And that's generally the kind of topic that we're going to talk about today. And there's some fantastic insights in some of the research that we'll talk about over the next few slides. But optimization has been something that I've probably failed to pay enough attention to recently. But one of the challenges with scaling is that the management that surrounds your robotic workforce can become really unmanageable and actually a huge cost burden in itself. And that actually can be a bit of a blocker to scale, because you realise that the more you do, the more you need to support. Which is why today's conversation for those organisations that are growing is going to be so important, and why it's really great that we're getting the word out there on RPA Supervisor as well. So with that, show me the research. Now, just so everyone is aware, the research, and Erik, I'd love you to kind of pitch in here. The research was completed by yourselves. I know a number of other organisations pitched in, including ISG Automation. But just kind of give us a bit of background on, what you were doing, why you were doing it, and what you hoped to find. And then let's get into the snapshot of actually what those findings were.
Well, it started out with me talking to the rest of the team and customers about all of the interviews we've done over the years. So we've spoken to more than 250 user organizations of RPA, and what their concerns are, where their challenges are, and that's how we sort of improved on our product and did that. But we never had anything to show for it. So go out, and that's why we said, well, we need to create a survey. We need to include our partners and go to the market and see what are really your challenges in scaling up, and to benchmark organizations better.
Fantastic, great. And we've actually had our first question, so let's answer that while we can before we move on, if that's okay. So it's come from Pervi. His observation is that the failure to scale or adopt is usually a result of not having domain expertise integrated to own the outcome. What's your observation been with respect to this, and what is your recommendation on how companies can better scale and adapt using RPA and AI as not a niche, but rather as the new DNA? So loads of interesting points in that question. Any initial thoughts, Erik?
Well, I think there's a good part of that question, which is more general for you, sort of your side. From the RPA supervisor point of view, we don't necessarily meet that as the biggest challenge, because they're the ones that succeed are the ones that realize that they need help with managing, monitoring, reporting, and all of that. So they've already done some. They've already had some success. In general. Yes, you need, I think, a champion and someone who understands it. What supervisor delivers, and which is relevant to the next session you're doing, is so what we didn't think we would help customers with was the process mining. So the approach to process mining and the tools that are built are for a sort of top-down, supply-driven way of finding processes. What we see with supervisor, because we make the information available everywhere and the robots perform better than they did before, you actually get a bottom-up and as a demand-driven process mining, which was a surprise to us, but it really makes a difference for a lot of our customers.
Excellent, cool. I think it's a great question. I think there's so many reasons why organizations don't scale. I tend not to start with the technology either. I think it's process. A lot of it is process, culture. From a process perspective, not having, not every process that you look at, in fact, hardly any, are pure, simple, repetitive, digital in nature, and of a big enough scale to create meaningful change. So that's kind of one aspect. I think process, we've not done a fantastic job really of keeping our processes in check. We have what we write and what we document, and then we have what we actually do. And there's often a huge disconnect. So process for me is a big thing. You mentioned domain expertise. Absolutely, we need that expertise involved in the project. It's no point in, a financial services expert, trying to figure out how to, complete processes in life sciences. They just don't have that understanding of the why. They can absolutely see the what, but they might really struggle with why. Well, why is that done? I can see what's done, but I don't really know why. Because I think a large part of what we should be doing as consultants, as people in this industry, is not just automating something but because we can, but actually automating something because we should do. And we should only do that if we really have looked at other aspects. Is this process needed in the first place? Is there a different way of being able to do this? And I think all of those are really important. And I think, those organizations that have really thought about this, as part of a toolkit versus the solution, are those that really have, will succeed in the long term. And then the second part of your question, really, about the DNA part. One of the things I did very early on in my journey, kind of at 02, many moons ago, was I didn't just look at what we did. I looked at what we wanted to do. And I started to think about how do we think about automation at the very start of our change management process, of our new solution process. How do we start to think about automation when we're starting to think about how we do things, new things in the business? We launch a new product line, a new SKU code, we have a new product launch, all of these things. Think about automation from day zero, not when we have a problem further down the line. I think that for me was probably the one thing that I really am proud of in getting us to think about automation as part of our DNA, right? And that for me is something that not a great deal of organizations have really done. That's one of the kind of secret sauce that that I've taken to my clients over the last few years. So hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of insight. I think it's a great question. So thank you very much, Paveen. Really appreciate it. So with that, let's get ourselves into the survey. So Erik, I'm going to ask you just to kind of run through some of the data points, and then feel free to let me kind of pitch in with my thoughts.
Sure. I'll do that.
So first question: how long have you been using RPA?
Oh, all right. Do we have a slide? Because I can't see anything now.
Oh, okay. It's on the slides tab, but don't worry. So I think what we kind of see here, I think, and it probably is about right, is almost half, in fact, just over half of the respondents, and there were a significant number of respondents have been working with RPA for over the last kind of 3 to 5 years, and about half of are either in that kind of POC all the way down to 2 years. Most of them, I guess, have not necessarily come up against the RPA wall. Most of them have not necessarily struggled to find new opportunity. But they're obviously starting to build something with longevity, and that likely means that there's lots of process, lots of maintenance, lots of things that are running in the background, and probably quite a large support function. So I think it's a really good picture of where the market would be, in my view. So I think if we were to look at the sample and think, is that representative? I think this is a really good indicator that it is. It'd be interesting to think to see what the audience think and whether there's anything in here that is a surprise to you. Next question, I'll kind of hand it over to Erik because I think you can see the content now around bots in productions. I guess what are your thoughts on this?
Again, it fits very well with all my experience, personal experience, and all the interviews and so on. And there's a good correlation between the number of bots and the number of processes and the maturity. Surprisingly few have got lots of bots. There are lots of organizations that can scale up their automations a lot. Is what I see from this, and you saw from the journey that they're taking.
I mean, I was really surprised. I mean, looking at this, I'm not necessarily really surprised. I think, again, it's a real indication of where the market is. That the number of robots, 45% of organizations with less than 5 bots. I think it's a really good indication when we talk about scaling and we talk about maturity, yet we've got nearly half of organizations who have, over half of them have been doing this for, 3 to 5 years plus, yet still 5 of them have got, half of them have still got less than 5 bots. Are those, really insightful information. It backs up a lot of things that I've seen. It always surprises me when I see this kind of insight in the flesh, though.
I think it also represents the fact that it's more accessible. So smaller organizations are also picking up, and I think we'll see this more and more managed service providers. You only get you start with 2 processes or 5 and so on. You don't need the whole center of excellence and so on to run it, and then you scale up as you go.
Fantastic. I mean, thinking about the next one. So again, generally, with scale, how do you manage your robots? Obviously, this one's a really important metric for you guys with the solution that you had. So I guess what were your thoughts on this? No real surprises from me. Just explain to the audience kind of what MSP is.
Managed service providers. So most of them are actually, they've got maybe built a process to do the management for them, and the in-house tools are also very often quite simple. But some of the reporting we see in large organizations are quite impressive, but really it requires a lot of resources. And it's not surprising. It's a new tool, and as you know, we're actually building the market because there aren't many tools around, or any really, to do what we do.
Absolutely. And then again, and the next question, kind of like, what is holding back, your ability to scale? I guess there's loads of insight here from the survey. So just thinking about, what's holding back, organizations saying that, that they hadn't implemented process mining, development cost was, quite a high one. Reporting and insight, obviously that one would be a very useful one for you guys. License utilization is holding them back. So I guess what they're really talking about there is this ability to manage their licenses in an efficient manner. Low return on investment. We've seen this, over and over again, and I guess we are certainly starting to see the shift on where development work is taking place, at least from an ISG automation perspective, to try and help with some of that return on investment. But there are a number of different things, I guess, that you are helping with, and we'll talk a little bit about that kind of try and address at least some of these. And if you think about, if these are the reasons that people are saying, we're struggling to scale because of these, the more of these you kind of tick off, I guess the more useful your tool is to helping organizations scale up their automation efforts, right?
Yeah, and I mean, development cost, there's not much our tool can do about that. may help sort of with some design issues. But other than that, there's a huge difference in perception from RPA Supervisor customers and non-RPA Supervisor customers on this. But this is to be expected. I think process mining is interesting. I think it's interesting that that's a problem. There's so much to automate. There's so much potential. So why isn't the demand in the organization driving that forward? But it is a problem in lots of organizations.
Excellent. And last but not least, and I guess this really helps with kind of showcasing, at least some of the reasons as to why. This is about, I guess the output here is around technology improving bot utilization. So this really is kind of cementing, the kind of why message with you guys. I mean, talk to us a little bit about this and how this, insight should be useful to the audience.
Yeah, so the graph on the left just shows the percentage of organizations using a tool with the number of processes they've automated. And not surprisingly, the higher the number of automated processes, the higher the need for a tool. But we also see organizations using with very few processes, starting with a tool like Supervisor to sort out that bit early on. And when you get beyond 100 processes, it becomes very expensive and very difficult to provide the level of service and get to utilization and so on that you need per bot or for your business.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So, a really interesting research there. This is the first time I believe that much of this has been shown. I'm right in thinking, Erik, this is just a snippet, isn't it? We've kind of picked some specific points for today's webinar, but obviously there is quite a lot more to the report. So yeah, this is hopefully a sneak peek to everything else, and I'm sure that will be shared in due course, right?
Yeah, and everyone's sort of happy. We're happy for everyone to reach out to ISG or to us, and we're happy to share the whole report with you, so you can have a look through it and benchmark it to where you are as well. Yeah, on your journey. Fantastic.
Right. So just to kind of recap for everyone, and then we've got loads of questions. So let me just kind of, in summary. That those companies, and again, it's not a surprise, those companies who are more mature have now started to use the technology. We know that those companies who are using the technology have been able to increase their utilization, increase the number of processes that they run per bot, which in theory is bringing down their run costs. And so, there's a bit of a tipping point we're seeing from the data that as you start to get over 20 processes in live, then it's time to start thinking about maybe beyond your RPA tool for managing, reporting, and assessing your utilization. So it's kind of a bit of a benchmark based on this data. It's around 20 processes plus. And that's certainly something I've started to think about. So probably about half the market, or just maybe probably about 40% of organizations that have kind of tipped into that 20 process plus bucket based on the earlier data. So, great insight. Let's ask some questions, and then I've kind of got a few slides really where I just kind of want to highlight some of the benefits and value proposition of RPA Supervisor along with Erik. So we've kind of let's have a look. So Christian has asked a question about how long have we been using RPA in the healthcare market. I'll be honest, from an ISG automation perspective, we've got quite a few life sciences, pharmaceutical, and healthcare clients. And probably the most mature of those is probably about 3 years in, I would think. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but probably, we've been heavily involved in that area for around about the last kind of 3 years. There's another question from Krishna around what should be the total cost on technology for an implementation to a customer. Tools costs are getting high as implementation costs are, and obviously as we start to look at multiple tools, these costs are kind of stacking up. Great question. And Erik, I don't know whether you have a view on this. I certainly do, and I think it's a really interesting point. But Erik, any view on the kind of the rising costs of implementation, new tools, and maybe this now not being the cheap and dirty way of transforming your business?
Yeah, well, I always found it interesting that customers very often focus on the license cost, which on average is around 10% of the total cost. And then you've got some support from professional service, ISG, but the biggest cost is internal resources, unless you outsource everything, of course. And I think you should do it right. So you mentioned earlier that from 20 licenses you see the need, or that's where the market is. I think from 20 licenses there, that's when they see the pain and therefore need to do something about it. So ideally, the capabilities to automate this would be in every product from the start. But in terms of cost, I think you need to go into this with a bigger view than just the cost. So how many FTEs can I save? If you don't want to go on the digital transformation route, you're never going to be happy with your automation journey ever. So you need to be committed to it and see the benefits beyond the savings of FTEs. Is my opinion.
At least the immediate savings. The reason why I like the question is I've often pondered this one myself. So certainly when I kind of got into RPA to start with, it was a very cheap technology. Interestingly, there weren't any professional services organizations that were even doing RPA at that point. So it was all internal costs for us. But in comparison to the cost that I see associated with RPA now, it was very small. That continues to rise as we add in all these other technologies. And so I feel like there becomes a tipping point at some point in the future. And interestingly, I'm on a panel about this in a couple of months, where the no-code, low-code revolution actually becomes more expensive than traditional methods of IT automation. And the whole reason why RPA grew in popularity was because it boycotted IT, it was cheaper than IT, and it could be put in the hands of the operation. Suddenly, if it becomes more complex, if it becomes more expensive, does it still belong in the operations, or actually now does it need to go back into IT? I don't think there's necessarily an answer now, but I think it's a fantastic question. It's one that I've been pondering for a few months now. So thank you for asking. Hopefully that kind of helps somewhat. There are a few more questions. I think I might leave them to the end, because I do want to just talk a little bit about what RPA Supervisor does. We've kind of spoken about the role of helping to reduce costs, reduce management costs. I guess there are kind of 4 aspects to the product. I mean, can you just kind of give us 30 seconds on each of these, Erik?
Yes, I'll try. So Measure is the first problem I think most organizations see. I don't know what my robots are doing. I don't have insight. I don't know when they're stopping, when they're operating, and so on. And you need to do that to be able to scale up. The orchestration is the fact that we've changed completely from a sort of scheduling world to an SLA-driven planning and orchestration. So you just put in the business requirements, and the supervisor will every few seconds calculate which process should be worked on which items and so on. And then again, it's nice to know when a VDI is unavailable or a process has terminated, but someone needs to go in there and start it. And that's what the manage part is of the RPA Supervisor. You just configure how you want it to handle logins, logouts, restarts, frozen sessions, and so on. And then the interact bit is where we've got the human in the loop, all the pre-built connectors to different platforms, including Microsoft, and the APIs and so on, which is what sort of drives that hyper automation element of the solution.
Fantastic. So, I'm hoping that everyone can kind of see that value associated with those 4 specific aspects. I think it's really, I personally can see the use of this, and it's only when I kind of look at this and you start to look at, the next slide here around the dashboard part, and I'm conscious that we're just looking at monitoring and reporting here, but just to kind of bring it to life for everybody, if you were to look at the control room within your RPA technology versus this, it's light and day. I really like this because I think it brings to life the fact that there is a different way of taking the data that you have with your RPA tool, applying it with something else. And I've seen great examples in Tableau, Power BI, etc. before, but it's been a lot of work. It's been very custom. But to have something like this kind of at your fingertips, this really is something that a CFO could look at, a CEO, very easy to take screenshots, put them in presentations. So, you can really start to see the value. And if you start to think about then the monitoring, the auto scheduling, and all of these kind of aspects, I'm hoping that you can really start to see why this type of technology, I think, is going to be valuable to the automation market, and why, as organizations start to scale, there are a number of different pain points here that can be removed. So I guess, is there anything, that I've kind of missed there, Erik?
I could talk about just the dashboards for an hour if you like, but I think you got the most important parts there, definitely.
Fantastic.
Well, it's available to the whole organization. I think that's important. It's a web application. You can allow every user to go in. They can customize the dashboard. You can create standards for them and so on.
Brilliant. Now, one of the things we kind of wanted to very much talk about, and one of the reasons for today's webinar really is about the free version that is available now through ISG Automation. The free version is unfortunately not everything, but it does highlight the earlier dashboard point, and it kind of gives you a snapshot into your world to understand where any pain points might be. And obviously then it just kind of gives you access to the initial platform. Can you talk to us a little bit about, the free version that's available, and, why people should be interested in getting this downloaded and making use of it?
For anyone who's starting up with RPA, just go with the free version to start with, because it gives you all of that information, and you can make it available and you see the value of the information. It also allows you, which doesn't show in this slide, but it also allows you to try out the orchestration on a limited number of processes, but you can try it out and see how it would affect your operations that way. So we've just released it. We've already implemented quite a few places, and the customers are really chuffed about it. So it's good.
Fantastic. And just to kind of finish off, just so everyone's aware, there are 2 other versions of the product, obviously the standard product and the enterprise product, which give you, the full suite of capabilities. But, if anybody is interested in the free version, feel free to reach out to myself or any of the ISG Automation team, and we'll be really happy to help. Now, as promised, guys, and this is perfectly planned, we're just about at 1:45. We have answered some of the questions, but I'm sure there are a few more. So anything that hasn't been asked at the moment, any burning questions that you have, do feel free to ask. There is another one here around how do we measure the level of RPA intelligent automation completed in an organization in the journey to scale. Krishna, you keep asking amazing questions. So I really struggle with this. I always think scale is in the eye of the beholder. How do you compare scaling in an organization with 100 people versus in an organization with 1 million people? You can't say it's the number of bots. And you can't say it's a number of transactions, right? It has to be the penetration within the opportunity. So, it has to be some kind of percentage measure, total work completed by people, that's now completed by bots overall across everything. They're the type of metrics I think that will, be the ones that show scale. Because if you've got, in a huge organization, you might complete 10 million transactions. It might be 0.5% of all the work that you complete. How is that scaled? But if you look at 10 million transactions, you'd be thinking, great, fantastic. We've done a great job. In reality, you are but a tick on a dog. You are just, a small piece of value there. And yes, there may be some fantastic outcomes associated with that. But in the grand scheme of scaling, you are still very much, at the very early dawn. So I think it's a great question. I don't know whether you've got any questions, obviously, on scale or definitions of scale that you want to share, Erik.
I've got two small comments to that. One is that I think we should be aware of the difference of growth and scale. Scaling is when you grow without when you get more output than you put in for the growth. So scaling is sort of efficient growth. The other thing on maturity or penetration of automation, I think it was about 1899 or something, the head of the patent office in the US went to the president and said it should be shut down because there was nothing more to invent that was worth having. And I think it's the same with penetration of automation. The more we automate and the way you see opportunities to do business in a different way, to automate more and using that. So you need to be on that transformation journey. Hyper-automation is a buzzword, but it really is that hyper-automation journey. You need to connect all of your systems with RPA, with artificial intelligence, and most importantly, with the humans and also the customers. So you'll never get there, and you'll never find the answer for any organization because there's always room for more.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Got a question that I think you can answer here. How long does it take using RPA Supervisor to stand up a process where the bot is fully operational? So, somebody takes the free product. How long between getting it and having it working would you anticipate?
It mostly depends on the processes or procedures within the organization. I had a client a while back. We installed RPA Supervisor in before lunch, put in one process, and then we did 100 processes over the next 4 days, including interviewing all of the process owners about their the SLAs, the business needs for the processes. So you can do everything in a week with more than 100 processes, or you can do it sort of slower.
Fantastic. Jean has asked a question about how is this different from the Insight tool from UiPath, and I guess the same could be said from what's available in the control room, and how is this different? And I think answer this in two ways. The first one is the free version, and then the second one is obviously maybe the standard or the enterprise version.
It's the big difference, I think, is that everything is SLA driven. So it's based on the business needs, business requirements, and you report what the business wants to know, not when the robot was working and so on, but did they do the job that was given to them? So it's not fixed in any sense. So that you get even with the free version. And then that's just a sort of reinforced when you get the monitoring and also the notification. So you can subscribe to notification about any incident, any event going, and any user in your organizations can do that. As I say, it's web-based, so everyone has all the information, and then it actually fixes all the problems which the solutions for UiPath, Blue Prism, and Automation Anywhere, and so on does not do. They do provide integrations, but it's not dynamic. So that's what drives sort of the hyper automation, is when you get a request from a chatbot or SAP or any other solution. It's the fact that you can set an SLA there of a minute or a second or whatever is required, and the supervisor will make sure that the resources available focus on those tasks first and get it back.
Excellent. I think that's an interesting point around. It's not what the work. It's not if the robot was there and if the work was done. It's more, was the work done in the SLAs that you would set. So it's using the same data, but it's looking at it through a different lens. It's looking at it more through an operational lens. Because to be fair, as an operational owner, yes, I care whether something's done. I actually care whether it's done within an SLA that's likely agreed with a customer, and could well be contractual. Like, I'm more interested in that, not whether or not it was just done. So it's almost like this, I guess, additional layer of kind of operational oversight that kind of is the incremental value over a UI path insights or Blue Prism control room, etc.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
precisely.
Cool. I think one more question. Let me just see, because we've got lots. So thank you. Really engaging session, guys. Some fantastic questions kind of coming in. Bina, I'm not going to answer yours. Bina asked whether we can let them know whether there's any additional off-the-shelf tools that clients are using to manage their bots or automated processes. Of course, today's webinar is about RPA Supervisor, so that is certainly one of them. And the only one that we'll talk about today. But I'm sure, as I remember with RPA, you can only create a market when there's more than one tool within that market. It's very difficult to be the only person doing what you do, because it's not really a market, it's a point solution. So I'm guessing that there is a competitive market that you're playing in, and you are one of a few tools that are kind of around, right?
I want to say yes, but we are building the market. There are a few tools that do similar things, none that does everything. But I'm sure we'll get some colleagues in other companies to build something similar.
Fantastic. And the last question is, again, it's kind of linked, but do you know how many of these, let's have a look, how many of those who use open source alternatives to manage robots and processes like OpenFlow? So that one's from Mete. I guess I don't know whether the data would have necessarily told us what tool these guys were using. So unfortunately, we don't have an answer to that. But are there any kind of open source competitors or tools that are kind of open source that do even some of what you do? Just to try and answer the question.
Nope, none that we've seen. There are some processors, some master processors around that can be used, but it helps you with the orchestration, but it's not a tool as such.
Got you. Cool. I think that's probably it. I'm conscious I wanted to finish before time. I'm conscious for many it's dinner time. I'm sure my children downstairs who have performed amicably, by the way. So I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old downstairs with their iPads, and they haven't interrupted us once. So I'm very thankful. Great that so many of you have managed to stay the course on today's show. I think that kind of shows the usefulness of the session today. So Erik, thank you for joining and for being such a willing participant.
Thank you very much for having me.
Excellent, and thank you, the audience. So Gillian, back to you.
Thank you. Yes, excellent discussion, guys. Thank you so much. And to our audience members, thank you for joining. Thank you for such great questions. But this does conclude our time today. You can find the replay about half an hour after the live presentation at the same link you used to register. But if you have any additional questions or would just like to get in touch, you can find us at www.isg-one.com. Thanks for listening.